Hey everyone, it's Dave March coming from the Land of Confusion Ricochet podcast, the show where we run by members, where we interview members about being members. So today we're coming in with Saint Augustine, who's in a very far away place. So, and here's my co-host Don Tillman.
Hi, I'm Don, or Namlet. Is it Augustine or Augustine?
I don't know. I don't care. In academia, people say Augustine, but if you're going to try to pronounce the way it was originally done in the Latin, you'd probably want to say Augustinus. So normal people who haven't spent a lot of time hearing it pronounced in university want to say Augustine, and that's probably a little closer to the original, even though we do say Augustine. I don't know. I don't care. Whatever.
We'll call you Augie.
That's fine. Yeah.
Or we could even call him Mark, which is his name.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So it's night here in the West Coast. I'm in the West Coast where it's night, and I can see you've got a window over there, Augie, where it's all brightly lit, perhaps.
Yeah, it's 11:04 a.m. in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. Okay, cool.
And was I guess the first question is what the heck you doing in Hong Kong? How'd you get there? And
Okay. I usually get here on Boeing 777. Probably once or twice there's been an Airbus. That's my go-to answer.
take a jumbo across the water, gonna see America. Yeah.
which replicates a dumb joke in Plato's Phaedo, where Socrates talks about the insufficiency of material cause. If you
3 minutes and we go into it. Excellent.
Yeah. Why am I sitting here? You can give an explanation about the bones and the sinews, but that's not really a very useful answer to the question. The real answer should say something about purpose or something. And I'm here to teach in the religion philosophy department at Hong Kong Baptist University. But yeah, there are Boeing 777s involved.
So go Wildcats.
Sorry, I'm missing a reference.
Yeah.
What's the mascot? I don't know. I just use Wildcats as the generic.
HKBU? I don't think we have a mascot. No one's told me what it is. I don't know. If we have one, I haven't heard about
Where's
it.
Where's your school spirit, man? No, it's from a humor sort of thing. You just defaultly go to Wildcats.
All right.
It's always go Wildcats.
So where did you grow up?
I was born in Burundi, so they tell me, but I don't remember it.
Okay.
I guess in order: Burundi, Texas, Kenya, with some more Texas in between. Missionary parents. My father at Senyati Baptist Hospital in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
And school in Kenya, and I went to Kenya on, I don't even remember, some kind of airplane, but the real reason was for school. So mostly Zimbabwe and Kenya.
Okay.
But somewhat Texas.
Okay. How long were you in Texas for?
Well, I can't do that kind of math.
Okay.
3 to 7 months every 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
But I was in Texas uninterrupted. Well, I guess there's a tiny stint in 02. I was in Texas, other than the 02 stint, from 01 to 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was you getting? I noticed you had a degree from Waco, so I was wondering.
Yes, bears.
No bears.
So that was where you were getting all your. It's interesting to see that you got all your degrees from basically the same universities. My father was a doctorate as well. He did political science, and he said in his day you would go to a different school for each level of degree.
Well, I did do my undergrad degree at Dallas Baptist University, Patriots. MA and PhD both Baylor, though. And they're both Texas Baptist universities of a sort.
Mm.
So yeah, there's something lacking according to one particular model of how education should work.
Mhm.
My bad.
Very cool.
So, how did you become? Are you okay? Do you consider yourself a conservative, a classical liberal, or a libertarian?
I think I'd go with conservative and classical liberal.
Mm.
I'm sure there's a nice Venn diagram
Mm.
we could, and maybe debate exactly how it should go. I'm pretty sure classical liberals and conservatives overlap, and probably classical liberals and libertarians probably overlap.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if libertarians and conservatives overlap, or if the conservatarian category is considered a hybrid rather than an overlap. I haven't read that book. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'd go with classical liberal and conservative.
Do we even know what the differences really are? I mean,
I would say with proper conservatism, there is a definitely more authoritarian streak than you would find in either classical liberalism or libertarian. And
Oh, really? Okay.
willingness to use government to get what you want, for one thing, is something I definitely see with conservatives willing to use government policy to support things like George W. Bush has supported the churches in his presidency is a good example of that.
Okay.
So in Canada, we have much more, the conservative is we're still much more traditional Rockefeller era conservatives here. So we have a lot more willing to use the government to get what we want versus the United States, which has gotten that since Reagan has become much more libertarian and trying to get the government out of the way of stuff.
By that definition, I might be somewhat less conservative, but I have to look at it at a case by case basis.
The other big thing about conservatism is, of course, preservation of things, the good things, and libertarians, I would think, are on the side of like, we want to try the new thing, or much more right-based focus. There's also the collectivism versus individualism. I think that.
I just thought the libertarians, there were two things about them. One is that they're very much have a brick wall between what the government can do and what it can't do.
Mm.
And the second is, as a party, they generally run people who are thoroughly unqualified and get a solid 1% of the vote.
Right.
To be fair, lots of us would ask a similar question to what is Aleppo if we were in that situation, or ask some other question about whatever.
Oh yeah. That one was like, it was more the way he said it. Is like, what is Aleppo? And he's like, you're kidding. I'm like, dude, I know what Aleppo is, but I didn't realize it was the center of this like big congregation. I think the one that really nailed him is he couldn't think of another world leader that he admired. It's like, I would just have gone like with Vicente Fox. And it's like, why would you choose that guy? I'm like, because he's the first guy who's became elected president of Mexico and left the office willingly, and not to like in a place in the world where that doesn't happen, or the democratic process doesn't happen very well.
Yeah, that's a safe answer.
Mm. So you ended up moving to I take it you've taken up with your family's Baptist tradition of doing missionary work. Is that how you kind of ended up in some of the countries you ended up in?
Well, Hong Kong and Pakistan.
Well, let's list the countries. Let's list the countries you've lived.
Well, my father worked at some Lutheran hospital because they needed someone, and the Baptist doctor was available at the time. Mm-hmm. In Burundi, then I guess we left when I was 2 or 3, and I don't remember a thing. Zimbabwe, Sinyati Baptist Hospital. Sinyati Baptist Mission. My father worked at the hospital. Then high school in Kenya, Roslyn Academy. And then just Texas for a while, 2 years working at Berry College in Georgia. And then I was in Pakistan for about 4 years, and now I'm in Hong Kong, and I don't know. I could pause and try to do math. I think we moved December 2017. Yeah, that sounds right. So if you just go from January and round down, 3 years in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost track of the question I was supposed to be answering.
No, I think you.
No, just clear. I was wondering which parts of the globe you've buzzed. So and now you're a professor at in Hong Kong, is that right?
So in Pakistan, I was working at Foreman Christian College, which is not strictly speaking a Christian college. It's got connections to the Presbyterian Church in Pakistan, and it's got a Christian heritage. And Hong Kong Baptist University, where I am now, is also not a Baptist university. It has a Baptist heritage, and it still has a chaplaincy. And the religion and philosophy department has more Christians in it, I suppose, than your average philosophy department, and probably more than your average religion department for that matter. But it's not strictly speaking a Baptist university either.
Right.
Actually, we do have in the official government document, I think it's actually a law. It's the Baptist University Ordinance, a preamble that says, oh my goodness, there's so much backstory that I barely understand and aren't going to be able to remember and won't have time to summarize anyway. But this was the law that established Hong Kong Baptist University, converting it from the Baptist College and making it a thing that received government funding in the, goodness, I don't even know, 70s, 80s. I think it was 70s or 80s. You could Google Hong Kong Baptist University Ordinance and you'll probably find the text of the law. The preamble says that we're supposed to teach a Christian philosophy of life or something like that. That's one of the purposes of the university, but it's not strictly speaking a Baptist university. I remember one of the questions I was supposed to answer, something about missions. Well, you can categorize different kinds of missionaries. There's the servants, the people who build schools and hospitals. There's the Bible translators, there's the evangelists, there's the church planners. It turns out I don't know enough languages to do translation. My Urdu skills are very poor. My Cantonese skills, my Cantonese skills are not good. My Urdu skills are not good. I'm not much of an evangelist. Church planning, I've had no success. Teaching I can do. You could classify me as a missionary in the servant category, like my father who worked at the Baptist hospital. But it might be better to just set that aside and say, I'm the Christian philosopher who works at these places. I know how to do that, whatever you call that. Missionary would be the right category. But broadly speaking, yeah, it's in the same tradition as my parents. And actually, my grandfather before that was also a medical missionary in East Africa. So I hope I've now answered two of the three questions. I think there was a third, and I have no idea what it was.
So you're teaching right now? Are you teaching courses?
Yes, this semester I've got 2 courses.
Ooh, what are they? Tell us about them. This ought to be good.
Okay, so for reasons unclear to me, I think it has something to do with the official recommended degree plans. They put out roadmap to getting your degree.
Yeah.
The ethics related general education courses have 2 or 3 times as many students in the fall semester as they do in the spring semester. So last semester, I would have been teaching 2 or 3 times as many students as I am now, and 3.5 courses. I've got one of the gen eds, and it's only about half populated, 30-something, 20-something students. It's on the subject of, the title of the course is Happiness, East and West. It's on the subject of different perspectives on what happiness is and how we get it. Primarily Eastern perspectives and Western perspectives, such as Aristotle, existentialism, deontology, hedonism, Confucianism, Taoism, Hinduism. And another course is a standard, let's call it a moral and political philosophy course for the religion, philosophy, ethics majors in the department. So we studied Plato's Republic in that course, which was great fun.
So I'm interested in this. Well, tell about the happiness course, Eastern versus Western. Gosh, what's the main differences? And what sort of working definition of happiness do we use for this to draw these kind of comparisons?
We don't use a working definition. We start off with, and it's even written into the syllabus. Let me rephrase. It's written into the course description. Okay, so things are not exactly the same here, but we still have course descriptions. Like in the American universities, we have the undergraduate catalog with its official
Right.
one-page course description. So going off that course description, which I put in the syllabus and make sure I stick to pretty closely, we actually start off with the question, what is happiness? With an emphasis on two major different ways of thinking about happiness, as a state of mind or as a state of being, a life that goes well for the person leading it. Some more complex state of well-being, I think, is the phrasing in the course description. So I think lesson 1, we just talk about the syllabus. Lesson 2, we talk about that definition, and I try to give a few pointers on people who give state of mind definitions and people who give state of being definitions, and make some distinctions between subjective and objective theories of happiness and blah, blah, blah. I can't answer the question either about Eastern Western perspectives, because if you look at a virtue ethics theory like Aristotle and a virtue ethics theory like Confucius, I think they agree on rather a lot. But if you look at a distinction between someone like Aristotle and someone like Sartre, the existentialist, you find a lot more disagreement than you find between the right Eastern and the right Western philosopher. There are disagreements in Western philosophy that are much greater than certain agreements between Western and Eastern philosophers. Within certain parameters. If you look at enough what Eastern philosophers, you'll probably find the same level of disagreement. Now, I'm not nearly as well trained in the Eastern context. Let's see. So in this course, we do 2 weeks on Confucianism and then 1 week where we look at Taoism. Let me think. Yes, we do Taoism and Buddhism very briefly, and then we're done.
Does the for academic purposes, does the definition of happiness change over time?
I don't know. I'd say not that I'm aware of. Probably in some super specialized sub-region of psychology or philosophy, the definition has changed over time. I imagine somewhere there's some expert on that who could actually answer that question and tell you that, in the year 1960 something, so-and-so published his influential article redefining happiness and set the terms of the debate until 1995 when so-and-so wrote his revolutionary book. And now understanding of happiness has progressed to the point where blah, blah, blah. I don't know. From the survey I can do and the somewhat deeper analysis of a few of the perspectives where I've got some actual competence, I don't see a lot of distinctions over time, just distinctions between different academic perspectives. There's something called happiness economics, and there's something called positive psychology. And then there's different branches of philosophy, and then there's different religions. I feel like I'm missing something.
Because the reason I ask is because I can't help but be reminded of the use of the word happiness in the Declaration of Independence, as in pursuit of, and that has a meaning, right? It's a meaning is being able to pursue what one wants to do in one's life to accomplish what one wants to accomplish, right? I was always impressed by that as kind of a where does your life's work want to lead kind of thing.
Okay. Different perspectives. There are different perspectives on happiness you can find by looking at different theories in philosophy or different religions or different eras of philosophy, like looking at Western philosophy. An ancient perspective on happiness is going to be pretty different from something modern, which again will be pretty different from something postmodern. The Lockean definition of happiness in the Declaration of Independence is going to be more modern.
Right.
When you put it all together, I prefer to think of these things as probably different aspects of happiness, different pieces to the puzzle. Like probably happiness comes in degrees, and complete happiness would, for at least most of us, include all of these things. Like it's hard to be happy when you're in extreme poverty.
Mm.
You're a very unusual, very noble sort of person who can totally manage that. But money is certainly not all there is to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And what was I talking about? The Declaration. Should I go to the Declaration?
Well, I also hear, who is it in the modern day? Dennis Prager. Is it Dennis Prager who preaches happiness as fulfilling life?
I think I wouldn't be surprised if he does.
Or is it the guy who looks a lot like him? I'm getting confused. But I think it was Dennis Prager.
Yeah, Dennis Prager's. I think the other person you're thinking of is a former governor, and like Haley Barbour. Maybe he looks a lot. Like
No. But well, let's just say Dennis Prager. If I come up with a different name, but and also oh boy, another. Oh, I'm mental block now. But yeah, I mean, there's been some modern day talk about happiness, about how we should strive to be happy, and it's one of Dennis Prager's bits, I think.
Mm-hmm. Is it Bill Bennett was maybe the other one?
No, it wasn't Bill Bennett, although it wasn't the one I was thinking of.
Okay.
But it'll come. I'll eventually remember it.
2 weeks from now, you'll be like, oh, wait, that guy.
But anyway, so you mentioned the Lockean definition used in the Declaration of Independence, and we have the modern day happiness. Are there differences? Does 200 years make it? 200, whatever, 40 years make a difference?
I don't know how to answer that because there's just so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
I could point to one thing in the contemporary era and say that's different from Locke, and maybe say how. But what is Ayn Rand's definition of happiness? I don't know. I've never studied Ayn Rand.
Mm-hmm. Well,
there's something else in the contemporary era, and I don't know who's got more which view has more adherence. I can just look at these little glimpses. The Lockean, well, actually, the Declaration of Independence, to have a proper understanding of it, you might need to know a lot of stuff that I don't know, a lot of history, a lot of how many different fields of study would you need to know? History, religion, law, literature. I mean, they all read Shakespeare, right?
Mm-hmm. They're all products of a similar style education, and were some of the best and most learned men of their time, and came up with an incredible document that studying and they had this sense of moment that we got something special we are going to cook up here. Let's do it right. Versus someone like some of the earlier, like say the Venetian Republic, who were just making it up as they went along.
Hey folks, I got to do an internet reset.
Okay.
Emergency internet reset. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You keep going. I'll be back.
We'll talk about some other stuff.
Reminds me, I should pull up the URL on my phone in case I have any internet problems. I'll have it back up. Okay, so well, now I'm confused. Oh, I clicked on your profile in Ricochet. I'm trying to go back to the emails so I can find the
messages. Yep.
URL. Okay, so one area where I do have some competence is philosophy, and there's a ton of the philosophy I don't have competence in.
Mm-hmm.
I never properly studied Montesquieu and whatnot, but I can connect some salient points from the history of philosophy to things like the Declaration, which probably works well as long as one of those points is Locke. I think the Declaration probably has more Locke in it than anything else. So the Lockean definition of happiness should probably not be taken from the Second Treatise of Government, which is where we probably want to take it from. It should be taken from the Letter Concerning Toleration, where he says there's two halves of the happy life, or two aspects of the happy life. There's the pursuit of, maybe I should say two aspects of the pursuit of happiness. There's the pursuit of eternal goods, and there's the pursuit of temporal goods. And government is, and property rights. Well, government exists to protect property rights, and property rights are there for the pursuit of temporal happiness. Mm-hmm. And how does that connect to a state of being definition of happiness? Well, on first glance, there might be more in Locke that I don't have in my head right now. Well, there's books I haven't read, but it does look different from these state of being perspectives on happiness. Like if it's not Prager, it's someone else.
Yeah.
Martin Seligman, more or less in 1998, founded the discipline of positive psychology, or if discipline is the wrong word, the field of positive psychology, or if field is the wrong word, the research project of positive psychology. And from what I can tell, he ends up with a nice state of
You're muted, Don.
state of being, fulfilling life description of happiness, which is probably, well, actually, as much as I like LoC, it's probably better than LoC. It's probably more comprehensive. One of the conclusions I am prepared to draw after looking at all the different perspectives I try to cover in this course is the correct definition of happiness is going to have to be complex. It's going to have to be multifaceted, include a lot of things.
Yeah,
well that's good, right? That's a good thing.
I just remember,
I would think,
the Gorgias debates where it's like, is the dictator of a certain city truly happy being the dictator?
Plato's Republic, Book 9. He's not happy.
And what was the other course again that you were teaching?
Philosophy, morality, and society. And more or less, it's a moral political philosophy course. So we did we did one lesson looking at Confucianism, one Aristotle, one Augustine for the pre-modern half of the course, and the rest was Plato's Republic. I think after that we're doing LoC. I think we're doing LoC tonight, actually.
All right.
LoC.
Good thing I asked.
All right, get you in the right headspace. Here's something I recently learned when I was like shocked, and then as a historian, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense, at least. So during the First World War, the German army made Nietzsche mandatory for their soldiers and officer class to read, and I'm like, that explains a lot.
For why though? Was there?
Yeah, just they thought that his teachings would make the soldiers better and more brutal and more willing to figure out ways to win the war. And of course, that kind of that philosophy was came into, of course, the post-war era. So when all those soldiers went home and started trying to live their lives. Imagine if someone decided to make we had like 10 million Randians suddenly came into being, and it was mandatory. It's just like a very disruptive thing, and it explains a little bit more about what was going on in Germany in the post-war era.
Very good.
They misunderstood Nietzsche, almost certainly.
I'm sure they did.
As people do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, no wonder why things went so wrong if you were like trying to bring a somewhat esoteric philosophy into making it mandatory for like people who don't have the understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
Anyways, sorry about that grim dereliction away, but perhaps we should talk about something else. I'm more curious, like what it's like to live, especially as a expat who doesn't speak a lot of the local language in some of these countries. Is it the university is pretty much English speaking, or is there?
I guess it's bilingual or trilingual. Well, here's a slightly fun fact that might be useless depending on where you are and who's there. In the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan's major language is Urdu. Well, Punjabi is a native tongue for lots of people, and there are other tribal tongues and whatnot. But the major language is probably Urdu. Probably more people speak Urdu than anything else. And Urdu is almost the same as Hindi, the major language of India, spoken. Written, they're completely different languages.
Mm.
One is descended from Sanskrit and one is descended from Persian and Arabic.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So totally different written languages, mostly the same spoken languages. Or if they're different languages, they can communicate pretty well. Probably a little better than, I don't know, a Portuguese speaker and a Spanish speaker. A little bit more like a Scottish and a Texan trying to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
They can figure it out. Chinese is the opposite. Chinese is more or less one written language with a few complications, like there are simplified characters and there are traditional characters that have more complexities. But spoken, the languages are quite different. The big one is Mandarin or Putonghua, and you can ask the internet how many people speak that. I think it's something along the lines of 1 billion. I think the runner-up is Cantonese or Guangdonghua, and that's, I don't know, again, you can ask the internet, a few 100,000 probably. Oh, really? And a good chunk of southern China, but Hong Kong's main language is Cantonese, and probably after that English. Lots of people speak English. To get closer to answering the actual question, Americans have it way too easy. You can go anywhere in the world and survive because not everyone speaks English. Everywhere, enough people speak English. At least I've never been anywhere where it wasn't possible to get by on just English. It makes it easy. I try not to be easy, but my brain is really slow to pick up Guangdonghua.
I think we should give rock and roll credit for that. I think because music spreads language. In fact, I once worked with a Japanese fellow who learned English solely through American blues records because he was really liked the blues a lot, and so when he had his mojo working, it was actually quite excellent.
I just assumed it was also because the English conquered 1/5 of the planet.
Well, yeah. Also the technology. No, it's also true. Very much so. The technology drove everything. There's no computer language that I know of that's not English, for instance, and drove all the new devices, the new inventions, pretty much all English driven. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those two things: the technology, manufacturing, I guess, or the products, and the music.
Mm-hmm.
A fun idle speculation is what will be the language that's like this in the future. Will it be some later version of English? Will it be something
Clockwork Orange language? Well, it used to be French, right? It used to be, French was the lingua franca.
Yep, everyone
of international business deals and such. Yeah. Diplomacy, yeah.
There was once a science fiction series of novels, and the future language was Nameric, or North American.
Yeah, and that that delightful experiment with Esperanto did not go well.
No.
Right.
I've speculated.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, you finish your sentence, and then I'll give.
No, I was going to say, Esperanto just failed miserably, and the goals were so reasonable, right? Consistent spelling, consistent pronunciation. I think all the nouns ended in O. Excuse me, I got to mute because I got a cough really bad here. Hold on.
Okay, no problem.
I missed it, didn't I? Sorry. Wrong.
Not a problem. So I've speculated maybe the next. Oh, are you still going?
Yeah, I was going to say, and so all the nouns ended in O, I think, and the whole thing made poetry impossible. right?
That's a problem.
Or song lyrics and poetry, impossible. So so it went nowhere. And the final little bit is that our own favorite space captain, Captain Kirk, William Shatner, before the Star Trek series, did a movie in Esperanto.
Really?
Yes, so he's an Esperanto expert.
Well, good for him, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm speculating.
I got to imagine, you know, the William Shatner overacting in Esperanto. It's got to be just sweet, man.
Yeah, it probably is. Speculation is it might be Urdu Hindi, based on not only the fact that India and Pakistan combined have a rather significant population, but also in Dubai, in Arabia, on the streets, what people are speaking is mostly a mishmash of 80% Urdu Hindi and 20% Arabic English, I guess, probably. That's my vague impression. It's sheer speculation. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, didn't the people of Pakistan come from India for the most part?
Well, it's complicated. I mean, which part of Pakistan? Culturally, where we were was Lahore, and the Punjab is both India and Pakistan. The food is very similar and delicious, and it will burn your tongue off. And if you don't like yogurt, I do not like yogurt. The biryani is extra painful, and you're warned to only drink bottled water because what's in the taps might have heaven knows what illness in it. So you got to go easy on the water, or only drink the Coca-Cola to try to cope with the burning biryani. But it's delicious. It's wonderful. And to answer one of the to meander back towards the earlier question, what it's like. One of the minor aspects of what it's like is it's good if you like tea. I've discovered iron Buddha while living in Hong Kong. And in Pakistan, I rediscovered how to drink tea with sugar and milk. Where was I? Punjab?
Yep.
Yeah.
Drinking tea.
Pakistan culturally are a lot of the same spoken language and same food and same clothing and lots of things like that. Partition, when they split up when the British left and they split up British India and made it new India plus Pakistan, the line went right through the plains of the Punjab. And there's some real tragic stories about people who've never seen their family members or haven't seen members in decades because the line split them from their neighbors or something, split them from their family or haven't seen their neighbors or whatever. Where the people came from, I have no idea. I think people debate this. There are scholarly theories about Dravidian populations and my brain's freezing, Indo-European populations invading, and I have no idea what the facts are. Pakistan also has Baluchistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and my brain's freezing, Sindh, and some of the tribal regions of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa are probably culturally they're more like Afghanistan than anything else, which is Pashto.
Yeah, we have a lot of I know a number of Christian Pakistani people because they vote conservative in Canada for some reason.
I figured it out.
Yep. No, it's actually interesting. I was talking to a guy from England who was much more into his end of things. He's like a British YouTuber, and I was asking him, so do the different ethnic groups vote on a particular party lines in England as they do here in Canada? And we got to compare some notes. But yeah, different groups tend to vote for different political parties. We have a much bigger swings than, say, the United States, where it's still, unfortunately, one particular political party has not figured out how to talk to the new Canadians, as we would call them.
Yeah, at some point, American conservatives need to figure that out. The day, well, technically the day of the election in 2016, when Trump surprised most of us by winning, the day was, I guess the day was a Tuesday, but with time zones being what they are, I figured out Trump was winning on Wednesday morning during class. And because of the particular circumstances, this was not a smart classroom. We didn't have a projector. And I think I didn't have a printer, or had only recently acquired a printer in my office, because, Pakistan. I was using my laptop for accessing class notes. So I talking about, I don't know, Socrates or something. And I'm also looking at these New York Times, the thing they do now with describe it. Thing.
Oh, the little meter that shows
the meter.
chance.
One time it worked, it was in 2016.
Realizing, oh my gosh, Trump is winning. And my brain was all scrambled. I told myself to have no expectations, but when Trump won, I was shocked and realized I'd been expecting him to lose. That day, I had a lot of fun laughing at how it all went. Also, I was coming up with new ways to try to kill the mice who kept coming into my office and trying to eat my Mari biscuits. So I laughed maniacally at the mice and at weird political situation in America. But I also had some very sober fun explaining to some of my students some of the disadvantages of the American left. Like they'd been told the usual stuff for the most part. And I remember meeting one person in Pakistan who thought Trump as a capitalist guy would likely lead to more trade between Pakistan and the USA, which would be useful. That was cool. But as a general rule, what they've heard is Trump is opposed to women's rights, and Trump hates Muslims, and Trump's a racist, and the Democrats are the noble people who care about the poor, and they care about immigrants, and all these things. So I had fun explaining to students after class that Democrats' official policy these days has become restriction of religious liberty for Muslims, unless they're going to get on the same-sex marriage and the transgender bandwagon and start supporting these things. You can quote Hillary saying we'll need new theologies for these religions that do not approve of these things.
By the way, during that election, I knew Trump would win unless there was significant voter fraud. And the reason I knew was because I was carefully counting the YouTube reactions for the Trump rallies and the Clinton rallies. And the viewership was like an order of magnitude, 10 to 1, using the engineering term, 10 to 1 difference between them. And the ones that did watch the Clinton rallies, maybe 100 to 1. It was a lot. And the ones that did watch the Clinton rallies all gave thumbs down. So you had like 10 to 1 thumbs down versus thumbs up. So it was extreme. And I knew that it was all the reports were in fact bogus, because I could see the YouTube counts. They were really, it was 10 to 1 thumbs up, thumbs down, and 10 to 1 view count. And that convinced me.
I was still very much a polling person at that time. And I was watching 2 weeks out, Hillary Clinton on Real Clear Politics average had about 222 to about 100 points for Trump in the Real Clear Points things. And by election day, Trump still had 100 and Hillary was at 100. And I was like, that's momentum and it's not going in the Democrats' direction.
Right.
So I was not shocked.
Also, I knew that the polls were wrong, wildly wrong. Yeah, they were wildly wrong.
And they got worse in the next election.
And they got worse. Yeah, but and I think the worst was the Nate Silver, the 6'3", 35", whatever poll, and his was the worst because for a number of reasons. One of them is he reported the numbers with like 4-digit accuracy when the first digit was not even correct.
Yeah.
All right. And the reason he did that was so he can get more eyeball clicks, because when numbers printed with so much accuracy, it changes that much more often. And people are drawn to it and seeing, oh, it's went up 0.001%. Woohoo. And he was being an entertainment source. He was not being an accurate presenter of the numbers. And further, we see that as a polling organization, he has no incentive to be accurate, or political polling organizations in general have no incentive to be accurate. They don't make more money if they're more accurate. In fact, the one that was accurate, nobody even knows who it was. It was the LA Times poll. But the famous poll is the one that was wildly reactive. Was wildly inaccurate. So, and even later, their reputation was still good. They didn't lose any customers because of that.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
like when you look at
when you have incentives like that, I think you're doomed.
Yeah, I mean, look at the New York Times poll. These things were so wildly inaccurate, but you look at New York Times readership, it's now 97% Democrats. They don't want to read a poll where they're going to lose, right?
Exactly.
They don't want to have accurate polling. So they're just, they're feeding their audience. And a lot of the big old classic polling organizations refuse to do national US polls anymore. Because they can't.
Right. If you're a polling organization that does the serious polling, like such as customer reactions to products, things like that, your bread and butter is in your accuracy. But in political polling, the opposite. Your bread and butter is in your inaccuracy. And philosophically, I'm very much a believer in Newtonian mechanics applied to the way things end up working. The monetary incentive is a big force. You got your mass, you got your force. You can calculate the direction it's going to move. And so I look at the incentives as the force where the masses move.
I guess we'll get into get down the last 10 minutes of the show and talk with you, St. Augustine. You got into a little bit of a thing in the 2020 election as being the guy who is going to correlate all the data about some of the stuff the interesting things that happened in the last few weeks after the election.
Yeah, it shouldn't have been me. It really shouldn't have been me. It was so exhausting. Initially, I was just trying to keep track of different claims. I think that's what I was trying to do. And then I morphed into trying to categorize the claims. And then it morphed into trying to evaluate as much as I could. And I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
If that's not a host disabled screen sharing, it says.
Okay, I need to figure out how to
share my screen.
Yeah.
So I ended up writing. Well, let me jump ahead for a moment and try to jump back in time.
Sure, you can share your screen now, I think.
Was I? Shukriya. Okay, so if anyone's watching this, YouTube or something, here is a place where you can find it. This URL. Now, the best thing to do is just find St. Augustine on Ricochet. But here, you should be able to find, well, I guess it's
parlor.com/profile/teacher of philosophy.
I've got some internet problem. If you go to this URL and scroll down, you should find a link to where I put it all together. So I guess no, that's not in the screen show. Let's see if Ricochet works. Okay, so I started off as these Ricochet posts where I initially, well, just looking at the 4 main ones. You know what, let me, Let me go to this one. This is the summary we need. It started off as these Ricochet posts, and eventually I put it together on Microsoft Word documents that I made shareable on a cloud somewhere. And it ended up being 50 something pages, maybe 60 something pages. The initial one was just this one where I try to keep track of some of the different allegations. Then here's my initial attempt to see what conclusions we can draw from it. I had to go into detail on one of the conclusions. And then I had to go into some musings on, well, what do we do now? Okay, so initial one, this is the foundation. This is the big one. This is something like 45 pages probably. Initial conclusions, more details on one of those conclusions in particular, and where do we go from here? The headline of this one, where I put together the 4 links, is probably about right. If Parler were working, I could read what I wrote there and not try to remember it. But I have the least popular set of opinions on the subject of 2020 election fraud on the entire internet.
I don't know. Your opinions kind of track with mine. I never thought there was like a big central issue. I think people just set the terms and let nature flow.
Very good, very good. But most people have one oversimplified extreme or another. Biden is the legitimate president, or
he's definitely now because Congress wants to get the way your system works. From what I could tell is that once the states decide whether or not they accept the election, and once they certify it, and then it's certified by the Congress, the person is the president. So whether or not the elections were fraudulent or not doesn't matter. Once the states send up their choose the electors they send, that's what happens.
Yeah, it's a lot of this is up to the states.
Yeah.
So I think there was no centralized illegal conspiracy. If we had more time, we could talk about the Time Magazine article that appears to document a centralized legal conspiracy of some sort. But setting that aside, I don't think there was a centralized illegal conspiracy. I think Biden's a legitimate president. I think there was no mass electronic fraud. There was no hammer and scorecard. Now, it's I can't guarantee there was no electronic fraud, and there is one question about that, like that Scott Adams is going over. Maybe there's some reason the numbers would show Trump losing votes a lot of times, but
no, there
really better explanation for that, other than
there's zero explanation for that, man.
No, it's not zero. It's not zero. I think in this Snopes report, we have the explanation that one time at least it was a typo. Okay, one time it's a typo.
No.
The electrical engineer here has a different opinion.
No, we don't accept that. No.
If there's an explanation, I would like it, but not understand. I'm just sort of Occam's razor on this. I don't understand.
Not good. No.
The traditional forms of election fraud and come to some conclusions there.
Yeah.
No.
As someone who's actually run elections and has been in elections on the small scale that were fraudulent, I can tell you that it's there are certain tricks to the trade, and they were all on display.
Okay, hang on, David. You're talking about the traditional stuff, not the electronic stuff.
Yeah.
Don, you're talking about the electronic stuff, right? And you know something about computers.
Oh yeah.
So you say there's no plausible explanation. In fact, we talk about this somewhere on some.
Yeah, well, more than that, it's easy. It's really easy, and because the computer program, the software, is being given the job of tallying the votes, and there are no error checks of any kind. There's none, and we've been told to, there I am, look at me. We've been told to just trust the results of this computer program. And that's not how you write software. You have lots of testing. You have multiple ways of counting. There's all sorts of things you can do that were eagerly avoided.
Mm-hmm. So
Eagerly. It was like, it was like, oh, they're trusting our result. Woohoo! Let's go. And that's what it was.
My understanding, because they did a lot of hand count rebalancing, and it usually in the places where the voting machines were used, it added up often, except for probably Michigan, where they keep their voting ballots in like steel drums that are untouchable once counted or something like that. It's very confusing to me what happened to Michigan, but it's designed. The Democratic, when the Democratic vice chair of the Senate committee, state Senate committee says, we cannot trust any election that has come out of Detroit in 30 years. There's a bigger problem going on there.
Right.
But
yeah,
it looks like the machines were designed to be steal elections in other countries and probably have done so, but it doesn't, because they did a whole lot of hand balloting and it usually came within pretty much the margin of error. It does not look like they were used in this context, but some people I know think it's all part of a disinformation campaign to basically screw with Trump lawyers, to basically like, oh yeah, you guys go right ahead and say all those crazy things and we'll prove that we're not actually doing that. So that's why but yeah, they hand counted a lot of places. I mean, in Wisconsin, the judges ruled that yes, 200,000 ballots were illegally voted on, but the certification went ahead. So it's too late for us to do it. Its point is moot. So they've already voted. Stuff like that happened. The problem for Trump is he only had a small group of core people around him. He did not have a Reagan level philosophical movement that got in there and appointed all these people to him. So all these judges that were more George W. Bush judges, because they
no time and process issues in the courts.
Yeah.
So the electronic fraud question, I tried to sort through that somewhere in here.
Mm-hmm.
And and it got so confusing and exhausting and detailed. At a minimum, I would like to have, if there's no significant electronic fraud, I would like to have an explanation for some of those things. And Don Tillman's objections sound pretty sensible to me.
Yeah.
And just looking at the other kinds of fraud, I do have, I must count them somewhere. Allegations that didn't pan out. I've got at least 12 allegations that don't seem to be going anywhere. And some were just outlandish from the start, like the mob boss in Philadelphia. There's some interesting inference to the best explanations arguments. There are grounds for concern that are of some interest, but 33 allegations that are just still standing. And I think this is 33. There's some overlap in these categories. Let's see. Yes, just still standing. But as many as 15 that survive some level of verification or critical scrutiny. And these that are still standing are pretty significant. Lots of zombie votes. There are ways of tracking zombie votes. This guy in Georgia, Michigan, tracking zombie votes, is that what we're doing here? Oh no, this is that complication with ghost ballots.
Yep.
Which I struggled to figure out. Allegations where you can't put numbers on the claims, but there are reports of shenanigans in vote counting centers. I'm looking for Georgia. Oh, Jesse Binal's methodology in Nevada looks impressive to me, but as far as
I love that when wasn't Ron Wyden's in the Senate hearing at the federal level, and he asked the state secretary of state of Nevada and says, according to your records, you had 32,000 people vote twice. Yep. How many? Isn't it a crime in your state to have that happen? He's like, well, yes. How many people have you prosecuted for this? None.
Now that,
And the,
hold
and
on,
the
right
margin
there.
of error is 16,000 votes. I'm like, yeah, give me a break.
What you said right there is really, really, really important. Right there, boom. Yes, that's incredibly important, and that tells you if that is considered normal, we have a big problem.
Yep.
So Mark Davis in Georgia, his methodology, from what I can tell, is really good. Someone's done some level of fact checking on it. It's working with very reliable sources. And his methodology alone uncovers enough illegal votes to exceed Biden's margin of victory in Georgia. So when you put it all together, my conclusion actually is that illegal action split multiple swing states. And in this document, I look over the numbers, and the numbers are pretty impressive where you could track them. I don't know if this comes through well in the video in the recording.
Well, the fun one is is that they finally agreed to open up the Fulton County. The judges ordered the signature match ballot audit of Fulton County votes in the 2020 election. So they're actually going to have to go in and hand audit them, not just hand count them, but do verification. And we'll find out if, say, photocopies of just Joe Biden votes showed up or not.
Right.
And the fact is, and one thing is that one of the reasons why the Dominion machines were sold in Georgia, according to Raffensperger's own testimony, is that they would take a photographic scan of every vote, and yet they didn't want to ever release it till after election day.
Yeah, I think. Well, first off, if I apply my same metrics that worked so well in the 2016 election, in terms of rallies, YouTube video views, ups and downs, all that, it was like 3 orders of magnitude for Trump because Biden had no rallies, and the ones that were there, like 6 people attended.
Oh yeah.
So there was really no on the ground excitement. Where I live, Silicon Valley, it's like, I don't know, 80-something% Democrat. There were no Biden signs, or maybe a couple. I only saw a couple Biden signs. I saw far more Black Lives Matter signs. But I think the scariest part of this for me was that in 6 states simultaneously, the voting stopped at like 1 a.m. They shut it down, and at that point, they were able to count how many votes would be needed in addition to put Biden over, but not be too much to be crazy. And they calculated that number, and then when the polls, when the counting opened again, boom, we had spikes in all those states simultaneously.
Right.
And I can't. That's completely brazen.
Yep, that's
the one thing. Because
I was doing a call-in show until 2 a.m. that night, and we were just going through the numbers, and I'm like, okay, well, I think Trump's won. There's no way anyone could come back from it is statistically impossible to come back in this way from these deficits. And of course, Biden came back from there's no way he could come back from Pennsylvania with that much vote left. There was just
no
way.
This hadn't happened before. Right. This hadn't ever happened before. The closing down of the tallying.
Yeah, I mean, in my country, the next day I ran into a friend of mine walking on the street, and he said, "David, have you ever heard? What would you have done if Elections Canada had said we're shutting down the ballot counting?" And I said, "Before or after I punched him in the face." It's like I have friends who've slept with ballot boxes to protect the integrity of elections in Canada. The idea that you go
I think, given that, and the other thing is that when they decided they needed that many votes, and the Dominion machines and the Smartmatic software added those in, then they had to pound in so many ballots through the machines, and we saw them do that. We also saw the reason they could do that was all these voting centers and you can check this, out. Oh, I think all the voting centers were in the middle of cities with incredibly high Democratic populations, so that the pool of election workers was guaranteed to be Democrats.
But you know what?
And
I talked to people who are in your country, and they're basically said it doesn't matter if you could be in counties that are that vote 70% Republican, and most of those places are still being run by Democrats. All the election poll workers, all these places.
yes,
And that's been going on for decades.
yeah. And my running theory is that the George Floyd riots were actually recruiting job fairs for poll
Certainly, they
workers.
were in Detroit from all the witness testimony.
So, which would make sense because, you arrest the people at the riots and you say, well, if you want to work for us, we'll let you go free. Oh, pretty God. But that's a crazy theory. But you'd have to go through some work to get evidence for that, and I don't have that.
There's
But
a lot of
it's a humorous theory.
there's a lot of important stuff there that I generally classify as inference to the best explanation arguments, which I think do count for something. But a lot of it, I think, needs more. Like these are red flags telling us where to look. But I'd like things to be substantiated as much as possible,
Right.
By some kind of harder evidence.
Yeah.
Which is why, partially because I don't even know myself how heavily to weight these kinds of inferences to the best explanation. I know how to do the math on these numbers.
Yeah.
And speaking of inferences to the best explanation, I think this bit alone.
Yeah, right there. They've been told by the last 4 years that the election was stolen by a combination of Russia and the Russians hacked the last election. And then, of course, we got all these internet companies coming out and telling us everything is fine. There's nothing wrong with this election. And you're crazy. It's the most pure as the driven snow election, even though there's been no major changes other than to expand the franchise in weird ways.
So this was the greatest opportunity to cheat in any election. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I don't know enough history. This was an unusually high opportunity to cheat in an American election. Historically high, maybe not the highest, but historically high. And probably the highest ever motive Democrats have ever had to cheat based on their distaste for Trump.
Yep.
Yeah.
Plus, in the key swing states, we have Democrat control of all the mechanisms in cities like Philadelphia.
Yes.
Except for Georgia.
Much by itself.
But the guy in charge of Georgia State Secretary of State there, apparently he's a John Kasich Republican. People keep asking why this guy who was this insider would have done these things, and it's like they went through his Twitter feed and they found out who were the things he said about Trump in 2016. And they're like, oh, well, this might explain some things.
Or they have photographs.
I've always suspected the Occam's razor, and it's usually...
Well, sure.
Yeah. But I don't want to speculate out loud because I don't want to get sued. Not that anyone's really going to watch this beyond the cast of Ricochet, but still.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. But the good news is a lot of the states are doing things about it. It's like it all comes in cycles. Like the last time they tried something, now we'll try it. It goes back the other way. And I mean, you got Georgia's passed this giant reform bill to prevent almost everything that happened in there. Pennsylvania is doing the same thing, though we don't know. But I fully suspect there will be much more tougher, people have been energized in a way that they have not been before. And I think some of the reasons why we have so much testimony in some of the places where things happened is because the Trump asked all the people to go and volunteer to go work polls. And so suddenly in places no one had ever been a poll worker before in some of these Democrat counties in Pennsylvania and Michigan, suddenly people were showing up to poll watch. And they were like, wait, what are you doing here? Not to mention the Pennsylvania law we got to see because of the virus. They said, you can observe the ballot processing from 20 feet away. And I was like, that's the most upsetting thing I saw during the Georgia one and some of the Pennsylvania stuff where they said, as long as you're in the building, you're observing the election process. I'm sorry, I can't challenge a ballot from 30 feet away.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And I think, we have an opportunity using computer technology to check these things, to check the tallies, to check that these votes are legal, to check that the people are alive who are voting. We can check for multiple votes. We can do a lot of this. And I think the software technology should be used in that direction instead of hiding the votes. And I think that's the biggest opportunity.
Personally, yeah.
Oh, look at that. What did it say? Yeah.
I mean, in 2022, we're going to see a lot more people show up to volunteer to do poll watching, and a lot more people showing up with their cameras in hand. So when some of the crazy things that were said to have happened at some of these Senate testimonies, people are going to be like, and they're not going to care that it's illegal for them to have their phones out, because they'll be like just documenting everything. And some of them won't have necessarily their phones up. Google, there's now video cameras on your glasses that are pretty realistic and stuff like that. The GoPros and all these other camera technology, and people just doing live streams to the internet. That will make a bit of a difference.
Yeah. Right. And they can have cameras at these vote tallying places.
Mm-hmm.
They could do that. It's not hard.
Yeah.
So, hey, we running overtime?
Oh yeah, we're definitely running overtime, but I thought it was like suddenly we got kind of energized. So
why don't we? Happens.
Yeah. Well, anyways, it is kind of late for me, so why don't we?
That's right.
Close down here, and maybe we can have some sort of philosophical exit.
I'm not good at that.
Anything from Spinoza?
No, I could do Spock. I could say live long and prosper.
Okay, perfect. Live long and prosper.
But I guess I could advertise. I could advertise.
Of course.
We'll put it on the thing. We'll put it on the post.
Also, I do Rumble these days.
Perfect.
Excellent. Even better.
I'm meaning to put our videos up on Rumble. I did it once, but I just need to sit down and upload everything.
Yeah, I don't have time to sort through this. I think I have the same screen name on Rumble. Live long and prosper is the best I've gotten.
Okay,
I'm not even sure.
good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for coming out.
Hey, it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And good night.
Night.
Good night to all.
Bye-bye.